Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab's free online webinar. You are currently participating in Trust is a Must, Creating a Community of Donors. Questions are encouraged throughout the webinar, whether they be content or technically related, and you can type them into the questions box as they arise, and they'll be read by our moderator during the Q&A portion. Your presenters today are Scott and Sondra. I will now hand it over to you two.
Thank you, Tori. Hi, all. This is Sondra Dellaripa. I'm president of Harvest Development Group. I'm joined by my colleague, Scott Selig. Combined, Scott and I have about 50 years of executive leadership in nonprofit. We have worked for a variety of nonprofits in healthcare, in academics, also in social services, in the arts. Harvest is 11 years old. Last month, and it was the result of a long journey of working in organizations and understanding what was needed by leaders such as yourself. So thank you for joining us today for Trust is a Must, Creating a Community of Donors. I have to tell you, that title is a little different than what we normally call this. What we're doing in this workshop is understanding and developing a framework for building a philanthropic community based on trust that inspires giving. So we define philanthropic communities separate from your fundraising strategy, and we'll explore a little bit more about that as we go today. But to do this and to give us a story along the way for us to attach to and to understand through illustration, we're going to use the iconic music festival Woodstock, and that's going to help us understand how trust builds and is built in communities that grow philanthropically. There is a reason why Woodstock, an event that drew over 500,000 people, but really lasted only for 4 days, is still revered and celebrated today. It was an event that engendered trust, and we can use the Woodstock community concepts that we're going to pull out to nurture our own trusting communities, to evolve philanthropy that will inspire giving. Inspired giving will respond to your fundraising strategy. So that's our launch into this. We're going to start with a little clip of Woodstock to kind of get us in the mood. I encourage, and so does Scott, a lot of questions along the way, and challenge us. If there are things that we're sharing or that we're considering that you feel need more discussion, let's do it. So on we go. Let's hear about Woodstock.
The Woodstock Music Concert, 3-day aquarium expedition at White Lake in Temple, New York, will give you uncomplicated, unhurried, calm days of peace and music. Hundreds of thousands of rock music rock music festival, not being banned from the highways leading to the resort area as the producers and vehicles heading to that festival will turn back home.
You can get that place tense in the viewing area. Please do take them down so those behind you as well.
We're a pretty big city right now. So we've got all sorts of things. Richard Bach, get back to Eddie Kramer in the sound. Richard Bach, get back to Eddie Kramer.
Before we begin, we ask you to read once again the towers and then to say, Brett, thank you for making all this possible.
So Woodstock was absolutely one of my favorite music festivals. I did not go. I was only 6 at the time. But as we go up every year to visit the museum that sits there, it just really resonates with me how community can be built so quickly when there is trust. So let's talk a little bit about trust in your organization. Are there, in your current fund development, in your current relationships with your donors or in your strategy, which of these trust issues are you experiencing? Or if there's another trust issue that you're experiencing that doesn't show up here, go ahead and throw it in the chat and Scott will include it in our discussion. So let's just take a minute and see what trust issues you might be, the symptoms of trust issues that you might be seeing.
So everyone should see a poll coming across their screen right now. I'm seeing some really great engagement, and you can select which answer is most pertinent to you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in just a few seconds. And share our results. Sondra, are you able to see these?
I am in my little audience view box. Very cool. So it looks like we have no major gift program. That seems to be a problem, as well as our relationship with our donor base is shallow. You're not alone. We work with hundreds of organizations every year. And the reason that these 4 issues made this poll is because it is the 4 that we work with our executives in our nonprofit clients most frequently. Trust is not something that is built quickly. It takes a lot of time. There are a myriad reasons why we don't apply the time to building trust. It could be resources of staff, it could be resources of money, it could be lack of experience, lack of knowledge. The list goes on and on. But it's not an excuse, because unless we get this trust issue down, we're not going to see a change. Let me just flip to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about a traditional operational fund development program. So this is pretty much how most of you operate right now. You have a great case for support. You host some events. This last year and a half has caused us to use social media much better and much more frequently than we ever have in the past. And then somewhere along the line, you're asking for a gift, whether it be through an email or a letter or a GoFundMe or a Facebook solicitation, a Facebook event. You're asking for money, you're receiving money, you're thanking them, and then many of you have very simple recognition, some of you have fancier recognition, you might have some annual events around this, and then you send an annual report. This is pretty much the linear aspect of how we operate our fund development right now. In addition to this, we're working in our organizations, and we're very active in our organizations. We're working directly with clients and our constituents. We know what the challenges are, and we do a good job of putting those into a narrative in an annual report, or maybe sharing them in some mid-year report or bullets that we put out. We're planning and evaluating based on what we're seeing. We're researching problems, and then we're having these celebrations when we come up with solutions. All of this is happening inside your organization. But then we're reaching out into the community and asking them for support. When all of the living in your community is happening inside your organization with your team and your staff, and not including the community, they're just expected to watch, listen, and send money, this is not a good way to build trust. Trust is built through intentional and consistent communication and engagement. We hear that word a lot. This is another representation of evidence of low trust. How many times do we inform our donor base? And that donor base can be individuals, it can be corporations, can be grantors. How many times are we informing our donor base of what's going on, what our success is, what our challenges are, what our needs are? And then balance that against how many times our base is responding. Sometimes, often, maybe, rarely. This is very, very common and another symptom of low trust in an organization. Building a community of trust for philanthropy is really dependent on 3 steps. One is that trust is necessary to build community. You cannot build community without trust. Community is necessary to evolve philanthropy. Philanthropy, as we're going to learn, is an emotion that is evoked in community. And then the third is philanthropy then inspires giving. So those 3 steps must be present as we think about what we have to do to build this out. So we have another question. This one is not a poll, but what I'd like you to do is in the chat, could you just jot down some of your communities that you're a part of that you trust? And I'll give you a freebie right now. So I am part of a book club, and they have become like brothers and sisters to me, and I trust them implicitly. So that would be a community that I'm in that I trust. What are some of your communities? They may be athletic communities. They might be academic communities. Are they alma maters? Are they social groups? Are they fraternities or sororities? Are they community groups, neighborhood groups? Are they religious groups? Are they groups based on culture or ethnicity? Let us know some of the communities that come to mind that you are an active member in that you trust. And as you're thinking about that, I'd like you to think, and you don't need to share this part, but I really want to plant for you the idea that you're trusting them for a reason. Something has happened in that community and continues to happen that cause you to stay invested, to stay connected, to be eagerly awaiting the next group gathering or the next activity, to follow their operations and their presentations out in the social media, to say yes when they call. So what are some of the communities that you trust, and why are you trusting them? While you're doing that, I want to give you a little background here. So a trusting community can be built very quickly. And we see that in Woodstock. Woodstock was held August 15th to the 18th, 1969. As I said, it was 500,000 people on 37 acres of fields and hills and woods in this little town of White Lake, now called Bethel. That's in upstate New York. Now, the event itself, as it was occurring, was actually deemed an ecological disaster by the and was in a state of emergency by the state of New York. The event itself lost a ton of money while it was in operation, and it was in debt for years. So when we use that lens to look at Woodstock, we would not call it a success. But it was successful in building very quickly trust and philanthropy and community. Community is a mutually affirmative ecosystem. You can trust and you must be trustworthy. Those 2 things are connected, and you cannot have one without the other. So when we're talking about building a philanthropic community on trust, we certainly have to trust our donors, and they have to find us trustworthy as well. That is a really formative understanding of Woodstock. So really, how did this disaster that was started out as a music festival produced by a head shop owner, a music executive, and 2 trust fund babies out of New York. How did it turn into such an iconic experience that anchored itself into the American, even the global fabric of our history? And what does it teach us about a community's philanthropic response? Before we can explore how to build trust, we must understand that philanthropy is an emotion. It is an emotion that is evolved through a community. We often hear the term build a culture of philanthropy. I remember probably about 2 decades ago when I first heard that term, late 1990s. I was heading up I think I was just starting at Connecticut Children's Medical Center as their corporate and foundation relations director. And I went to a conference and they said, you have to build a culture of philanthropy. And I have to say, 20 years later, they're still using that term, and there are still as many people that don't quite understand what that means. How do you do it? Well, when we look at philanthropy, I think everybody knows now that it literally translated means love of mankind. Love is an action word. It is a state of being. The result of philanthropy, the result of that feeling is action, giving, assistance, sharing, support, guidance, direction, encouragement, and so on. This Woodstock experience was philanthropy. It was that unicorn of philanthropic culture that we all try to chase down. It was a state of being that engendered action, inspired by this love of mankind. It was a community that grew very quickly in trust and in being trustworthy. It was nurtured, albeit chaotically, and through its nurturing, it grew its philanthropic response. I want to just pause here for a second. I said that I'm going to help you understand why we separate philanthropy and fundraising, philanthropic community and fundraising strategy. Because philanthropy is an emotion that's built through community, it requires a different business model and a different mindset. You can't evolve philanthropy by sending an appeal letter. You can't evolve philanthropy by hosting an event. Those are tools that you can use to grow philanthropy, but those are part of your fundraising strategy. So I want to make sure that we clearly understand that philanthropy is this transformational relationship we're building, whereas fundraising is transactional. I can tell you that probably more than half of you right now are saying, I wish my board understood this, or I wish my executive director could hear this. There's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions. I think fund development and philanthropy is probably the least understood profession. We're making some headway, but I really admire you road warriors that are out there trying to change minds and help people to better understand this. Certainly share this presentation with them. It might be a starting point for some of your conversations, but it is essential that we separate these two. This is our illustration of what a philanthropic trust journey looks like for your donor base. So your philanthropic community, as a separate entity from your fundraising strategy, is certainly codependent, okay? But your philanthropic community is on this trust journey from awareness to understanding to feeling, on to reacting, and then ultimately taking action. Trust is born in this journey. I want to just pause on this and make sure that we understand what this is representing. So the bottom axis is showing what your donors are experiencing as they go on this journey. So the feelings that are being generated. It starts with value, and value is not about whether you use your investments wisely. That comes when we talk about worth. Value is what are you doing, and does it align with what your donor values? We're going to see how that plays out in Woodstock. because Woodstock was not for everyone. And one of the biggest mistakes we make when we're trying to build a philanthropic community is that we think everyone's our donor or everyone's our potential donor. They're not. Value is what your donor cares about, and is it aligned with what you're doing? You have to get comfortable with letting go. Bless and release is what we say at Harvest. There are going to be donors that you would love to have. They're just not going to be your donors. So let's focus on those donors that are aligned in what you're doing and what they value. The next step in your donors' trust journey and what they're feeling is worth. Are you worthy? Are you trustworthy? Certainly. And are you worthy of their investment? And there are things you can do to help express that. You can be very transparent in your financials. Consistent and intentional communication helps to grow this trust at this point. And saying what you're going to do and doing what you said you were going to do. That has to be the most critical piece here for your philanthropic community and their trust journey. And then they move on to this feeling of belonging. Go back and think about the communities that I asked you to identify that you're a part of. For me, belonging is such a strong emotion in those communities. I feel I belong. And how do I feel I belong? They accept me. They honor me. They value me. I know that because they're talking to me personally. They're not sending me e-broadcasts. They're not bombarding my mailbox with letters. They're picking up the phone. I'm meeting with them. I'm engaged with them. We're having conversations. That sense of belonging is the next step in your donor's trust journey. And then finally, impact. How am I making things happen in this community? Your donor wants to feel that impact. On the up and down vertical on the left-hand side, these are their actions that they're taking. So as they're on this trust journey, from value to worth to belonging to impact, they're actually behaving differently. So maybe the first is just awareness. You've asked them to join a community, you've invited them in, you've acquired them, as we might say in sales and marketing. They're at the very big end of your funnel. You're making yourself known to them. So they join, and as they join, because what you're doing is of value to them. As you begin to work through this trust journey with them, now they're feeling philanthropic. They're saying, gee, this is a great organization. I feel like I need to do something with them. So they're transforming at that point and they're reacting, even without you asking. Some of the best major gifts that I ever closed, I never even had to ask for the gift. And it came because we've focused a lot on building this trust journey with our donors. And then finally, their transformation leads to their response, which is taking action, either responding to your fundraising strategy that's aligned with this, or taking their own steps. So this, I think of all the slides, this is the one that I would love for you to focus on after this workshop and really work through. We know in our studies that there are really 5 core components that can build your philanthropic community and grow this trust. And it is true whether you're growing a nonprofit. This can also be applied to your social media community. This can be applied to your volunteer community. This can be applied to your staff, to your organization, its operations. These 5 core components are inviolable. They happen every single time, and they will lead to this trusting, evolved philanthropy. So we're going to go through each of these over the course of the next few slides. I just want to take a time check and see where we are, because I want to give you guys time for some questions at the end. So the first of the 5 core components are people. First and foremost, people. There has never been a community built on companies. We may think that chambers are built on companies, but they're not. The companies aren't showing up. It's the person that's showing up. There's never been a community based on foundations or government granting agencies. You must focus on the person, and this has to be personal. It might make us a little uncomfortable. There are some of us that would prefer to send the letter than pick up the phone or shoot an email or a text than show up at their door. But it must be personal with people. But not just any people, as we said, your people. People that find what you're doing and what you're promising fits with what they value. They have a shared purpose for being there. And what we saw at Woodstock was that everyone that showed up, those 500 people that showed up because they had a shared purpose. Their shared purpose obviously was primarily around music, all kinds of music, because the lineup was so eclectic at Woodstock. They had folk, they had pop, they had psychedelic rock. Your community does not need to be monolithic. It should be diverse, okay? And so the diversity that exists is really grounded in shared purpose. I can spend another hour talking about building a diverse community based on shared purpose, because that's really what is needed. But let's leave it at that for now. Believe it or not, the majority of Woodstock attendees were not the hippie freaks of the day. I mean, you certainly had the communes that came and helped serve food and act as peace police, but most of the kids were, you know, from New Jersey, and they had hair that ended above their ears and pressed chinos and button downs, but they all shared a purpose, and that was a love of music, as well as valuing nature, freedom, peaceful coexistence. So the question is, do you know what your shared purpose is for your community? It's probably not your mission. Your mission is something else. Go on your own exploration to understand what your shared purpose is in your community. Because once you have that defined, you're going to be able to leverage that and use that to not only grow your community and trust, they're going to see that you understand the shared purpose, but also to use it as a magnet to attract other people that value you, because it's based on that shared purpose. I want to just play a little clip from Woodstock that kind of underscores this idea of shared purpose. And in this clip, I think it's Max Gasker who gave his, I was going to say he was an old man, but I think he was like 48 or 52 and much younger than me at this moment. But he gave his farm for this. So let's just hear what he has to say.
This is the largest group of people ever assembled in one place. The important thing that you're proving to the world is that 500,000 kids, and I call you kids because I have children how old than you are, 500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music, and I got pleasure for it.
I love this guy. And no, that's not an error in the film. He was missing 2 fingers on his, I think it was his right hand from a tractor accident. Great guy. He really understood the shared purpose of the gathering. So people and shared purpose were through 2 of the 5 components that are necessary. The next one is shared experience. It would be easy to say that as nonprofits, our shared experiences are our gala, or you know, the film that the video, look how old I am, the video that we put out about the camp that happened last week. That's just marketing, right? The individuals at Woodstock shared not only the large experience of the music and the festival itself, but within the 37 acres, 2 things happened. One was there were little pop-up cities of people that the producers of this event created smaller shared experiences for. So there were actually 2 stages at Woodstock. So they started to segment, that's the word we use a lot, right? They started to segment the shared experiences so that people could really feel that it was a very personalized event. Again, trust is built when we feel that we are accepted and that we belong. And when Woodstock, or when your organization offers a donor or a Woodstock participant something that really resonates with them, it makes them feel like they know me, they get me, okay? The second thing that happened with shared experience is the members, the participants at Woodstock, started to create their own shared experience outside of the formal agenda for the 3 or 4 days. They created these little pop-up experiences in yoga, in cooking, in weaving, all sorts of things. The most iconic is the mudslide, right? So when your donors start to create shared experiences among themselves, we can give this a label, we can call it third-party event if you want, but it's not something that you market and that you invite people to do. It's something that needs to be evoked in your community so that they start to create these shared experiences about you, about the purpose themselves. The fourth component is shared resources. The philanthropy that quickly evolved within this Woodstock community expressed itself through the sharing of resources between the members and from the members to the community leaders, the event producers, and the working staff. Shared resources help to anchor that feeling of impact, okay? I am now moving from feeling that this is that we have an aligned value, that you're trustworthy and that you're worthy of my time and investment, that I'm belonging, and now I want to feel that I have an impact. So let me share some resources and let me receive some resources from other people. A very critical part of what helped to create the transformation and the reaction and grow the trust that was happening at Woodstock. And then the final component is trust. Now, it may seem redundant that we're talking about all of these pieces building trust, but you have to be intentional about building trust. And to build trust quickly, you have to have consistent and intentional communication. At Woodstock, the airwaves were rarely silent. If you ever listen to the Woodstock experience, and we happened to go up for the 50th anniversary a couple years ago, and one of the radio stations played the entire recording over the course of 3 days, morning, noon, night. And so if you listen to that, you will see that in between sets, the stage was rarely silent. When music wasn't playing, there were 3 gentlemen that were sharing information. They were giving direction. They were inspiring action. They were helping the 500,000 feel that they belong, that they had purpose, that they could impact the results of the weekend. And their patter was intentional. It kept the people entertained, engaged. It kept the people feeling that they were being heard and seen, and it kept them listening. It kept the participants alert and aware, and most important, it kept them responsive. This is what consistent and intentional communication will do to your philanthropic community. It is probably one of the most important things that you can focus on here. Your community will be eager to listen. They will be eager to respond. They'll feel seen. They'll feel important. They will feel as if they're meaningful. They'll feel that they're heard through this ongoing communication. And it builds trust quickly. It builds trust in you. It builds trust in the information that you're sharing. It builds trust in your promises. And it also builds trust between your community members as well. So let's hear some of the patter. And you can tell that it's not scripted. And that's really important to understand too. Consistency in your communication and intentionality is about knowing what your community wants to hear about, but it also cannot be performative. It has to be unscripted. It has to be real and authentic. Oh, I guess we're not going to hear what's happening there. But you would, if you listen to the Woodstock film, you will see that they stand up and they make jokes and they're very personable, and that's important. So this is our diagram as a case for proofing. And let's just take a look at time. So oh good, we're doing really well. So how do we apply this to our organization? Well, let's use this illustration as the framework for that. First, of course, we have people, and we know that that's what we have to focus on. Shared purpose. Now, our mission certainly could be a shared purpose. The impact of what we're doing could be a shared purpose. There also could be some social norms that are shared purpose. Maybe there's religion or an alliance with a belief system that is a shared purpose. I want to encourage you to think about shared purpose, understand what the big shared purpose is, but then peel back the layers. And what are the shared purpose of the segments of your philanthropic community? Very, very important. I don't know that Woodstock would have anchored itself so well in trust and in the iconic nature of what it was with 500,000 people if they hadn't had these smaller shared purposes amongst the participants. Same thing with shared experience. Certainly your programs and your services. At the beginning of this workshop, we talked about how life goes on inside your organization. And then we turn to the community and we send them some video and we give them a report and we ask for their support. That's not engagement in program and service. I think within the value of mitigating risk, certainly working in a hospital has made me aware of that. You must find ways to bring your philanthropic community into the work that you're doing in a real, authentic, first-person way. And that you will see a shift when you do that, because what we know about building trust is as they move through value and worth, they come into a feeling of belonging. And how better to feel like you belong than to have a community that you admire and that you want to be a part of, to ask for your participation in something. That's really essential. Advocacy can be a great way of doing that. Affinity groups can be an amazing way of doing that, all right? In your organization, let's talk about shared resources. Again, in that trust journey diagram that we have, belonging and then impact. You probably have among your database of donors that you're going to call your philanthropic community at this point, and it needs to be evolved, but you probably have anywhere from 50 to 50,000 people in there, right? I am sure that there are community members in your philanthropic community that have tremendous expertise. They probably have a remarkable network. They probably can bring a boatload of resources to not only to what you're doing, but to the experiences of the community as a whole. So let's reach out and rely on our philanthropic community, not just for funding, but for information, for advice, for expertise, in an authentic way, in a way that helps them to feel belonging and impact in their engagement with you. And then finally, trust. I think one of the biggest myths that we come across, and we hear this all the time from mostly boards, but some well-intentioned executive directors as well, and that is, well, we don't want to bother our donors. That's such a rejection of your community. There is no bothering. We have all sorts of tools available to us as a community member to shut you out if we just don't want to hear from you anymore, and that's okay. In addition to that, you can be very authentic and say, you're so important to us, and we want to be able to share everything with you that's going on in the organization and things that we know you would be specifically interested in or want to participate in. But if at any time this becomes too much, just let us know. That type of conversation and dialogue leading to that trusting relationship is really where you're trying to get with your community. So the consistency has to be regular, timely, expected. You're training them to hear from you, and it cannot be too far between. We have very short attention spans now. The other part of trust with communication is intentional. I can smell an e-broadcast that was sent to me simply because it's the second Friday of the month and on someone's schedule it said send the e-broadcast. Those are not the types of communications that we want to engage in. We want it to be purposeful, okay? We want it to say something. Yes, it's going to take a lot of work. This is all a lot of work, but it is the most essential work because ultimately you're generating a philanthropic emotion that is going to react to the fundraising strategy you're putting so much time and energy into now. Let's see.
Sondra, just wanted to let you know we have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, so what do we see in all of this? So we have this affirmative ecosystem that we're creating that will mean exponential growth for us. Our building that philanthropic community, that circle that we have on the left-hand side of this frame, will lead to collaborative sharing and this participatory response. I guarantee you begin to build trust and build this philanthropic community when you send information out or have a conversation and ask for a response, you are going to get it. So we're going to move from this very staid, rigid approach that we're currently using to this more evolved ecosystem and measure our response as well. Let me just give you one last word. This nurturing of community through these 5 elements created an amazing response at Woodstock. This community at Woodstock stopped at nothing to get there, and once they were there, they did everything to keep that garden growing and alive. Imagine having a philanthropic community of donors so eager to be with you that they go through tremendous lengths to participate. I want you to hear what this one woman did just to be a part of Woodstock.
Flora and I flew standby, $16 to New York City, and then we took a bus to train to Monticello, and then eventually some buses, and we got a ride in a car. But eventually, when we saw that it was bumper to bumper, we just got out of the car and started walking.
Thanks so much for joining us. I know we have some time for Q&A. I know Scott has a few words. I cannot see the chat. I'm not able to do that, but Scott can. So if you want to, I think Tori's gonna manage some of the Q&A right now. I'll just need to know what the questions are, Tori.
Of course. So we have one coming in from Liz asking or saying, can you say a little more about that last point, how shared purpose and mission are different?
Yes, of course. It's one of my favorite things to explore when we do strategic planning with organizations. Purpose, I'm going to start very simply. Purpose is why we get up in the morning. Mission is what we do after we get up. Okay. Purpose really is about, it's a very personal aspect. I encourage everyone to understand what your staff's purpose is for working for you, what your board's purpose is for being a part of your organization, what your donor's purpose is for being invested in what you're doing. Mission is what we're going to do to achieve our goals, to get to a vision that we've set out. So really in a hierarchy, it's purpose, vision, mission. Purpose is why we get up. It's what drives us to want to do something. I am invested in an organization in my community that does therapeutic horseback riding for children with developmental disabilities. My purpose for this is my niece who has trisomy 18. If I can provide her with a loving experience to build her confidence, I will do it. That's my purpose. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. I'm going to give everyone some more time to write in questions. Scott, I know you have something.
Yes. So what we'd love to do is to continue this conversation with all of you who are attending and those of you who might be listening to this recorded by creating a mastermind circle to really focus more on these type of issues and to talk and discuss and share as peers how we can create this type of trust with our donors and our communities. It is a free opportunity. We'll meet quarterly and we'll discuss these type of issues. If you're interested in something like this, we'll facilitate it. Please email me at sselig@harvestdevelopmentgrp.com. My email is in the chat, so you can find it there. But again, it's a free opportunity for us to really continue this community and really work on bringing these concepts back to your organizations. And we'd love to have you participate. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's all right. So Angela is again asking for Scott's email. I'm going to send that you directly, Angela, so you'll be able to send to all. Everyone should be able to see that. I'm not seeing any more questions at this point.
We are open to questions even beyond this. Get to Scott. We feel so strongly that this has the potential to really shift the way that organizations are working with their communities. We saw this during the pandemic. You know, some of you may have seen the reports. The first quarter of 2020, giving was up 7%. Overall, in the first quarter this year, it was up 10%. This is not a fluke. What we see when we unpack that is the organizations that focused on building a philanthropic community based on trust really were able to rely on that community during this pandemic. So I really feel strongly, and I will do everything to encourage you to work this out. And it's going to be different for each of you. These are not prescriptive formulas. This is something that you tailor to your own, and you need to better understand your community. You might have to do some research, you might have to do some surveying, but if you peel off each of those 5 components and really dive deep and understand them and create a strategy for it, I guarantee you're going to see a shift in the results.
Well, I think that is all that I'm seeing for questions for now, but I want to encourage everyone to reach out to Scott and Sondra. Seems like a really wonderful opportunity and a really amazing community that you all are building. So that's very exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. This is the formal close to our workshop. For our attendees, all materials and recordings are going to be made available on our website. You'll also be emailed by the end of the day tomorrow with a link to today's recording as well as today's slides. I want to thank everyone for being just wonderful participants in our polls and in the questions box today. This has been Trust is a Must, creating a community of donors. And again, thank you, Scott and Sondra, for educating our community.
You're so welcome. Thank you all for caring about what you are doing in your missions, in your organization, and for having the purpose in your lives to be there. I admire you.
And thank you all for attending, and we'd love you to participate again in these mastermind circle opportunity. It's a free opportunity to continue continue this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.